Okay, the next part I wanted to review with you is the general settings. So if you go from the home page, if you go to settings and then touch on general settings, it'll take you to basically the entire setup of the processor head. So if we look here, these are all submenus, and we'll just talk about each one. So the very first one is the pumps. So pump one enabled. Yes, we want that enabled. That's what makes the head go. Pump two is your secondary spool on the base machine. It'll fire when you want a main saw cut and the feed rolls because they require that extra flow. The pump off delay is the time from when you stop making a function to when the pumps will shut off. So generally, I would recommend around there. 373 milliseconds is good. That's fine. Okay, main saw, bar home sensor enabled or disabled. If you click on disabled, what that does is it will disable the home sensing of the bar, and the risk that you can run is that you could operate the feed rolls and the bar at the same time. So, which is obviously not good because you're gonna run the log right through the saw bar. But the only advantage to this, it's basically the advantage is it's good for diagnosing issues. But one advantage, I mean, you got let's just face it, you got one drag of wood left for the week, and you just want to get through that one little deck, and your sensor failed. What do? You don't have a spare. Well, this will do it. If you're a skilled operator and you're aware of the risk, you could disable it and keep working. Lockout main saw. If you lock out the main saw, what this does is it will it'll disable the main saw button. So what this is for, it's primarily for transport drivers when they come in and need to low bed your machine to another site. They don't accidentally press the main saw. Tilt down on cut, on or off. This is kind of nice to have a tilt down feature during cut sometimes. Bar down delay. This is the delay between when you press main saw and when the bar comes out. The advantage of using this feature is it'll set a delay between when the saw motor revs up to when the bar actually comes out. So it's just helpful to get the saw motor up to speed first before the bar comes out. Recommended setting, I would set it to around, probably start with around the 130 range millisecond. That's probably fine. Delim pressure. This is the squeeze pressure of the delim arms during a saw cut. So this is especially nice when you're in small wood and you don't want to crush the wood. You can set this at a certain pressure. Feed arm pressure, same story. You can control the pressure of the feed arms during your saw cut, and I would probably set feed arm pressure to 80%, and I would try your delim arm pressure around 70%. If it's holding the wood well, that's good. If it's holding it too tight or you notice and it's crushing, you could bring them down. Bar home pressure, bar down pressure, and bar in pressure. These settings are for heads that have a bar proportional control, electronic proportional control on the valve bank. So, like for example, the 622B has it, Warthog 623C has it. So I would set the bar home pressure, I would probably set that to around about 10%. You don't need very much just to keep the bar home. Bar down pressure is probably a good start point at 60%, maybe slightly lower. And then the bar in pressure, I would probably bring that up because you want to make sure that bar snaps back and clears the log. Now the bar down pressure, just so you understand it and how it works, is when you make a saw cut, you want the least amount of bar down pressure as possible, but you want the most speed and the most efficiency. So if, for example, if you notice that you're performing your cut and you see it slower, you would have a tendency to think you want more pressure, so you would bring this up. But actually what you're doing is that you're causing more stress on the saw motor to spin the chain, and you could even potentially stall the chain out. What you want to do is reduce this. So less pressure, the better. You want the chain to do the work, not the bar to do the work. Top saw, bar home sensor enabled or disabled. It's exactly what I was explaining about the main saw, and same with the lockout feature. The main cut button, you can set it to blocked or trigger top saw. So what this is when you are processing and you go to target, and then you press your topping button because you decide you want to make a top cut instead. This is the feature, this is the decision on what you want the main saw button to do. So you can either block the main saw button so you can't accidentally activate your main saw, or you can divert your main saw button so that it activates the top saw. It's a preference thing, you guys. It's based on probably what your experience has been in the past. So there's no right or wrong way. It's just a matter of what you want to get used to. Delim Pressure. This has been a feature that you guys have been asking for a long time. When you're performing a top cut, you probably want the least amount of pressure as possible because you're sick and tired of crushing the wood. Feed arm pressure, probably good around there, 65% range. Saw oil and options. Main saw proportional. This goes back to what I was talking about back here of the bar home pressure, bar down, and bar in pressure. If we disable this, you'll probably notice that those features are gone. So this is for heads that have an electronic main saw proportional control valve. And same thing for top saw. If you enable it, it will then appear on the bar home, bar down, and bar in pressures. Most heads don't have proportional control there. This is a pretty common setup for even Warta heads have this. Main saw oiler, disabled or enabled. These are for heads that have pulse oilers, electronic pulse oilers. So, for example, if you have let's just say a Warta 622B with a Supercut 100 404 saw, you don't have a pulse oiler, so keep that disabled. But if you have a 3/4 saw, you will have pulse oiler, so enable it. The main pulse time is the time between when the pulse oiler will shut off to back on. So what this means is how much oil are you getting to your bar. So if you increase this value to, well, what I just did here, 815 milliseconds, that means it's going to shut off for 815 milliseconds and then turn on briefly and then 815 milliseconds off again, which means less oil. If you want more oil, decrease that off time. I would set this to around 500 milliseconds as a great start point. Right there. Alternate behaviors. This is for heads that, for operators. Again, this is a preference thing. It's a matter of what you're used to. This will activate the measuring arm to go down if you press the feed arm closed button or if you press the main saw button. It all depends on what you want. Everybody's different. That's why we put this feature in. Processors. This is where you can select your head type and the defaults that go with that. So in this example, you can select through several head models. We have numerous of them, numerous set up already. So right at the top, the main laser offset, this is where you need to measure the distance between the saw bar and the beam of the fine end sensor. And if memory serves me right, I think the 22B was at 2.8 inch. Top saw offset. that's the distance between the main saw bar and the top saw bar. So I think the best way to get this accurate for your head, whatever head model you have, is to pick up a log, just pick up some scrap wood and perform a main saw cut. And then while that log is in the head, perform a top saw cut. Drop the log and measure what that distance is. And that's going to tell you what your distance is between your main saw and your top saw. And put that value in right here. Minimum diameter, this is your minimum closed diameter of your processor head. So whatever head you have, for example, in a 22B, you may want to set that to 3.1 inch and the maximum diameter of 31.3. That would do it. That's a good setting. New log diameter, that value is to tell the computer at what diameter are we going to go past in order to reset the counter to think that we're grabbing a new log, a new tree. So for example, usually you just want to set it to a few inches below maximum opening, but it all depends on what kind of wood profile you're in. For example, if the largest diameter tree that you have is 12 inch, well, maybe set your new log diameter to 18 inch, for example, so that every time your feed arms go past that 18 inch, it's going to reset the length counter into the dashes format. But keep in mind, you can't reset the measuring until the arms go below this value. So as long as your arms are past the new log diameter, you will never have zeros on your length measuring counter. You have to close the arms below this value. Heel rack, this is very straightforward. This is for machines that are equipped with heel rack, enabled or disabled. And reverse rotation direction, this is for our infamous axis reverse rotation kit that you can have installed on your head. If what this does is it'll electronically reverse the pilot lines on the base machine, so you can just simply press a button instead of if you have multiple operators that are used to different rotation direction, they don't have to switch the lines anymore. They can just install this cheap and easy kit, and you just use this feature. Base machine. This is where you can set your filter monitors, if you have a filter monitor or not. Main filter monitor will filter the main pressure filter going to the head. So usually most sensors will take about a 5-bar differential reading, 2 to 5 bar area. So this will sense the pressure before the filter and pressure after the filter. And if there's a big change, it will set an alarm off and it'll notify us here. Same thing with the case filter and the grit filter, if that's equipped as well, if you have filter monitoring. This is the grit filter is on the return line back from the head to the base machine. Grapple mode, if your machine is equipped with a grapple, as in you have a grapple and you want to install it, you can enable this feature. It's very useful. Let me back up. So what that does is our system will supply the outputs. So all you have to do is connect to the solenoids on the base machine to fire the grapple. So very easy. It's not difficult to do. It's very simple wiring pinouts. And same thing with cab leveling as well, if it's enabled or disabled. If you have a tilter machine, you just simply have to, again, follow the install instructions. And it's got a pinout where you run your wires from the Cypress module down to the solenoids on the tilter, so you can tilt forward, back, right, and left. Bail lock, 24 volts or 0 volts. This feature is for what this does is you can connect a single signal wire to the bail lock switch on your seat. We'll just get the verbiage right here. It could be some people call it the bail lock, some people call it the work lever or the safety lever or the hydraulic engage lever. But regardless of what it is, usually there's this electronic switch there, and this is where you could tap into it and set your signal into your cab module. What this does is if it's used, it senses if that switch is on or off, and it will either enable or disable the output pumps of the cab module. It's a secondary safety feature. Most base machines already have this, but we also have it as a secondary. And cab rotate sensors enabled or disabled. This is for heads that have a rotate valve on the processor head. For example, the SouthStar heads that have the rotate valve on board on the processor head, they use a sensor right off of the pilot circuit on the base machine. So we just want to enable that if we're installing this system onto a SouthStar head. Display, you can set the brightness, the volume, display units to imperial, and you can also set the date and time. I won't get too much into this because it's pretty basic, but if you do change it to metric, you can see where things change to millimeters and centimeters. It's very easy to use, guys. Like, this system is beyond the easiest thing that you'll have to ever encounter in your life. It's not a scary install at all.